Hello there, one and all, and thank you very much for tuning in to episode 519 of Love at First Scent with me, Persolaise, on YouTube live. As always, thank you very much for tuning in, regardless of whether you're watching the recording or you are watching live. We have several comments already. First one goes to Abuzar Aziz, who says, sounds very intriguing, can't wait. Thank you very much for that. Alex is here too, saying a nostalgic top 10 is the best way to celebrate the third Sunday of Advent. Gosh, is it all? Well, I suppose, yes, it must be the third Sunday of Advent because we've only got one more Sunday to go and then it's the big day. Oh, God, we're not ready. Jeff says, hoping to see a Puente on this list. James says, hello all. Jeff goes on to say, I remember you mentioning that you're always reminded of your grandparents' house when you smell jasmine and cigarettes from Etat d'Orange. Yeah, see, I forget all of these things that I reveal about myself. You're absolutely right. I do think of my grandparents' house, but jasmine and cigarettes is not on this list. Maybe it should have been, but it's not. Tina says, I tried Private Collection for the first time this week, and boy, did it make me feel nostalgic. I am not surprised to read that. Smarks says, I think all my favorite scents are nostalgic, mostly for a past I've never actually experienced myself. Fantastic cue for me to explain what it is that we're doing. But all of you, you're very, very welcome. I will come back to that in a moment. We're kind of gearing up towards the end of the year. I will try to do maybe one or two more videos before I present my list of the top 10 perfumes of the year, but I can't make any promises because, as I'm sure they are for you, things are pretty hectic down here, and I just simply don't know if I'm going to be able to find the time to actually do any more videos. But if I can, or if there's something that I really, really urgently, desperately need to review before we finish the year, then I will do so. But please don't hold it against me if I don't. Is 100-year-old Shalimar on the list, says Omar. I've talked about Shalimar so much in the past. Anyway, this is one of our top 10s. It is the top 10 for winter because the shortest day of the year is just a few days away, which means that meteorological winter, I think, is it meteorological winter that starts in a few days' time? And as you know, we try to do seasonal top 10s here. But I also, number one, I try not to overthink them, because I'm very, very adept at overthinking. And I think that, you know, overthinking is the enemy of well, overthinking is a good way of actually getting nothing done. So I try not to overthink them, but I also try to give them a very, very kind of loose theme, which I don't stick to slavishly, but it's just something on which to hang some of these ideas, so that I'm not completely, you know, just going at this blindly. And the theme for this list is perfumes that in one way or another could be described as being nostalgic. That doesn't necessarily mean that I consider them to be old-fashioned, but in their transporting effect, and all perfumes create different sorts of transporting effects. I mean, I think some perfumes transport you to a place. Some perfumes, which I think is very, very interesting, transport you into a different kind of experience, or into a different person's experience, into somebody else's skin. But some perfumes transporting experience is a sort of time transporting thing. And that's kind of what I was going for here. Some of the associations are a bit more obvious. Some of them are a little bit less obvious, a bit more idiosyncratic. So please feel free to agree, disagree, leave a comment, ask a question. If you enjoy the video, give it a like. If you haven't subscribed to this channel already, please do consider doing so. If you would like to find out how you can support my work, you should be able to see a link to my Ko-fi page in the video description below. But most importantly, please tell me what you are most looking forward to wearing for this winter as well, whether you're going on a kind of nostalgia kick or not. What are folks saying here? Navi says, hello all, scent of the day is Penhaligon's Lily of the Valley. That's a nostalgic one for me. Yes, and it's ended up being one of the better Lily of the Valley perfumes that we've got at the moment. Nima says, recently I found Will Germain perfumes at TK Maxx for £20 and picked up a few. Do you think it's a quality brand that uses high quality materials at the £20 price point? Do you think it's well? I've reviewed some of them. So go to the review section on persolaise.com and hopefully you will be able to find the answer to that question. James says, I think Misia always brings nostalgic feelings for me. Not my favorite perfume, but always able to transport me to a specific era. That's a good one. That's a good one. Ula says, Ula's replying. Tanima, is that Heartmain? It says, not so much for wintertime, but Tilia never fails to bring me back to my childhood summers in Latvia. Interesting. I think Tilia has been one of the most interesting releases of this year. It's not on this list. Misia is not on this list. Bois d'Azil is not on this list, Omar. I do also try to go for perfumes that maybe I haven't necessarily talked about before. Anyway, we need to get going. So let me just think first about whether there's one perfume that sort of sums up what I'm going for in terms of the mood. Well, why don't we go with the one that I've actually got, that I'm holding in the thumbnail. It isn't the oldest perfume on the list, but it is amongst the older ones. It's from 1970, from the French brand Reminiscence. This is their, can you see that? This is their patchouli, generally considered to be one of the best patchoulis ever made. And I haven't been able to find out who the perfumer is. I thought by now, you know, we would have known. We would have been able to have got hold of that bit of information, but from the research that I did, I wasn't able to find anything out. And for each of these perfumes, I've tried to think of an era or a time that they make me think of. You will be shocked to learn that not all of the eras that I'm about to talk about are ones that I have experienced myself. I know it will come as a surprise to you that I wasn't around in the 1920s and the 1930s. I was around in the 1970s, just about. But here we go. So Jeff Sheen says, Reminiscence nostalgic. I see what you did there. That was not planned at all. I've actually even got one perfume, two different brands, but two perfumes, same perfumer, two different brands, and that was completely unplanned. Anyway, so Reminiscence, it's a 1970 perfume, but it kind of transports me to what I imagine the more fun parts of the 1960s must have smelled like. This is, it is a kind of straight up and down patchouli scent. As I say, one of the best sort of single note patchouli perfumes you could hope to find. This is a recent-ish bottle. It is about, I think it's about 2 or 3 years old. I'm sure it smells different from when the scent originally came out in 1970. I would imagine that the 1970 version was funkier, dirtier, sweatier. It probably used, I would imagine it probably used genuine oak moss in the base, etc., etc., etc. But, Marcus says the perfumer seems to be Maurice Sozio. I have no idea who that is. Would you mind just telling me where you found that out? What's the source? What's your source? Do you have a source? Did you just make that up? What's your source? Please tell us. But this is a patchouli in this guise that's also very, very, thank you, fuzzy, very, very vanillic, quite powdery, quite chocolatey. If you've smelt Chanel's Coromandel, also not on this list, then you might get some sense of what this is like, because Coromandel works on a real kind of sort of powdered white chocolate note, then goes into a beautifully earthy but never too dirty patchouli. And this is similar. So there's also shades of Borneo, whatever the year is, from Serge Lutens. I can't ever remember. Is it like 1834 or something? And it's a very generous scent. And I realize I am looking at the past through very, 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 very rose-tinted glasses. You know, I'm not generally actually a person who is given to feelings of nostalgia. I think in that sense, shock horror, I'm a bit of an optimist. I'm always hoping that the future is going to be better. I'm always sort of thinking that actually we need to work on whatever progress it is that we have made. Ha ha. I think I was once told that if you're a writer, you must innately, even though you may be quite cynical and bitter sometimes, you must innately be quite optimistic, because writing is an act of optimism. Writing is an act of believing that the world could become a better place. And I kind of get that, although sometimes when I'm writing, I feel like the least optimistic person in the world. But you know what I mean? So where I was going with that, looking at the pass-through rose-tinted glasses, we have this image now of the 60s being this time where people really kind of wanted to embrace togetherness, embrace community, embrace sharing, embrace ideals that are sort of sneered at sometimes now. And I think this is what it makes me think of. It makes me think of people getting together, having a fun time. And there's also a kind of innocence about it. I mean, there must have been very, very dark sides to the 60s, in the same way that there are dark sides to all eras. You know, there must have been very, very unhappy, miserable people as a result of some of the things that were seen as being more permissible in the 60s. But we're putting that to one side because we're just having a fun nostalgia trip. Oh, Gavin says, no Manson, the family in this room. I was waiting for the first comment from you, Gavin. Exactly. No Manson, no Manson's here. And it's gentle, it's delicate, but it's also physical. There are bodies present in this scent. There's nothing asinine or android-like or ersatz about it. It's a very sort of real, living scent. Okay, so that gets us off the ground. Number one is Reminiscence Patchouli. What are you folks saying about it? Mitra Kai says, unfortunately, the world hasn't shown us that over the last few years. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you there. Bonsoir from Brussels. Bonsoir, says Iliona, loving today's theme. Top 10 nostalgic fragrances that remind us of 2020, says Spaced Out. Yeah, I know. That feels like a million years ago now, doesn't it? Is that Bell Boots says Carter reminds me of 1970s women remembering the 60s. Which one's that? Is it, or do you mean Cartier? Okay. Oh, Alex says Reminiscence Patchouli was the favorite perfume of my best friend who died 2 years ago. I'm so sorry about that. Every time I smell it, it feels like she's here with me again. Yeah, and perfume can do that, sometimes painfully so, but yes. Sorry to read that. Okay. What shall we have next? What shall we have next? Let's do this one. Let's get the Chanel out of the way, because I know a lot of you will be expecting a Chanel here, but maybe you're not expecting this one. This is one of the exclusives. This is one of the ones that in 2007 came out as an EDT. And then I think, sadly, the EDTs were discontinued around about 2018. What I have here is the EDT, one of the original EDTs. Both of them are credited to Jacques Polge, both the EDT and the EDP. I love the guesses. Bel Respiro 31. No, one that we don't talk about very often here, and it's actually number 18. I don't think we talk about number 18 often enough. A very, very overlooked Chanel. And I think I chose this one to tie in with what I said a few minutes ago about how I didn't want this to necessarily be a list of retro smelling type scents. In many ways, number 18 actually feels quite modern. But for me, it does have a nostalgic effect because, oh, it's so underrated, says Thomas. I'm glad you agree. Eric says, I love number 18. It feels earnest. I think I know what you mean there. That's a good word to describe it. First I've ever heard of this, says Moritz. Ooh. Jeff says, an Iris Ombrette Rose masterpiece. Well, Iris Rose Ombrette, absolutely. It's a perfect way of describing it. But to me, and also cedar. I always get like rosy pencil shavings in this one. It's one of the most elegant, gentle, again, quite generous, but in a very different sort of way, and I suppose in a more gender fluid type way. And for all of those sorts of reasons, this has always made me think of the 90s. It isn't a 90s perfume, as I say. It came out in 2007 first. It is, as a lot of you are saying, basically an iris rose. The iris is quite woody, quite rooty. I think it brings out the woodiness of the rose, but the rose also adds a kind of gentle, slightly pink tinge to the iris. The two work together really, really well. And maybe it's that rose iris combo that makes me think it's quite gender fluid, sort of genuinely unisex. You know, I could have gone for CK1. I could have gone for Calvin Klein CK1, but we've talked about CK1 quite a bit. But I think, you know, had Calvin Klein made this perfume in the 90s, I mean, they probably wouldn't, because they wouldn't have used such a good quality rose oil, but they probably would have achieved the same kind of gender fluid, gender bending, unisex sort of effect. There's something, as I say, very, very contemporary about it, but also quite timeless about it. Maybe its streamlined quality is what makes me think of simpler, more streamlined times, if you get what I mean. It's not baroque, it's not overpowering, it's not got a kind of fin de siècle grandness about it. It's just very, very, very confident in its simplicity. You know, I'm thinking it could have been like a 90s Issey Miyake creation. In fact, it might have been interesting as a kind of variant of l'Odyssée, because there's something very pure and purist about it. Gavin, this is very waif-like and ethereal, which was the model aesthetic. Yes, absolutely. I mean, wasn't that the era when Kate Moss, whose appeal I have never actually personally understood. I mean, no offense to Kate Moss. The last time I went to see Madonna, which was about a year ago, Kate Moss was in the row right in front of me, and it was all I could do to actually stop myself from looking, you know, because it was Kate Moss and I was there to see Madonna. But I've never understood the appeal of Kate Moss. I'm sure she's a brilliant model, but yes, that waif-like, androgynous, slightly wan, slightly transparent sort of feel, as I think summed up very well in number 18. Thomas says, I think the ombrette seeds are the most prominent aspect. Fair enough. Frag Chaitan says, I am nostalgic for the discovery and early days of wearing a well-loved perfume. Power Connection says, I think it gets even better as it settles on you. Yeah, I completely agree. Oh, and what else is Gavin saying? I think the structure of number 18, iris, floral, and fruit or something else, has been done too much by now. It's less interesting now because of how the range has developed. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree, but I still like number 18. I still enjoy wearing it. Oriana says, give me all the iris perfumes and no one gets hurt. Currently drooling for a bottle of Naked Dance from Oddity. Speaking of iris perfumes, do you remember a few days ago I did my Le Labo showcase? And I popped into Harrods the other day, and they have a Le Labo counter. And I asked if they would do the Iris 39, and they basically sort of shook their head and said no, and that they doubt any of the proper standalone boutiques would do it. So there we are. I think I've lost out on the Iris there. Ula says, I've had the 4 ml bottle of this for ages, as I've got the little Les Exclusives set they did once, but haven't smelt it until now. It's really lovely. I will give it a full wear tomorrow. Well, please promise to come back and let us know how your full wear goes. Okay, so there we are. We've done 2, and we're almost at the 20-minute mark, which means I need to get a move on. So that was number 18. That's our Chanel done. Maybe next we should do one of the ones where I've got one perfumer who's done 2 scents. Now, somebody mentioned Jasmine and Cigarettes from Etat Libre. I am actually going to go with a different Etat Libre, and this is from 2012. I adore this scent. A lot of you will know that I'm a huge fan of this scent, by Ralph Schwieger. This is their Afternoon of a Faun. I just fell in love with this perfume from first sniff, and I think I put it on my list of the best perfumes of that year. And to me, this is one of those eras where, as I said, you know, Please don't be overly shocked. I wasn't around. But to me, this is like the 1910s for very, very obvious reasons. It's a reference to the Ballet Russe. It's a reference to Nijinsky. It's, I think, a reference to old style Chypre fragrances from that sort of era. It's so Nijinsky, says Alex. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I never met the guy, but I would imagine this is quite Nijinsky. Mariana says, yes, beautiful scent, almost witchy. Completely agree. Jeff says, Nijinsky is smiling down, proud. Let's smell it. I really don't wear this enough. And I'm a little bit worried about smelling whatever the current formulation may be, because this is still the bottle from the original batch. Speaking of which, I smelt a tester of Portrait of a Lady at a John Lewis just the other day. And I keep hearing and reading lots and lots of things about how so many of the Frederic Malles have been reformulated. And I don't know, I think maybe we need to do a video on scents that I loved 10, 11, 12, 13 years ago and what their current formulations are like, because the Portrait did smell not entirely different. It was recognizable as Portrait, but it did smell significantly different. Mitra Kai says, oh my God, I love this one. Just discovered Afternoon of a Faun. So beautiful. I'm glad you like it. And Stephanie says, I have this in my collection because of Mr. P. That's amazing. I love that. I love the fact that people have got this because of me. And Navi Light says, I have a bit of a problem with this one. I loved the opening, but it just went a bit too laundry musk on me in the dry down. Ah, okay. Ralph says, haven't tried this one, but seeing the reviews, a lot of people make a nostalgic connection with this one. We'll definitely give it a try. Okay. What do you get here? Now, over the years, I've come to sort of detect and appreciate the immortelle note. You get a strong immortelle note here. But to me, this was also always about mosses, a really beautiful, energetic, bright citrus opening, a strong patchouli note. And again, like the Reminiscence that we just talked about, a very convincing, real physicality and sensuality. I mean, Nijinsky was meant to have been one of the most sensual dancers ever. And the 1910s, I mean, I don't know were they a particularly sensual time? I suppose, you know, the early 1910s may have been, because of course the world went through a terrible conflict in the second half of that decade. But there is a kind of unabashed sensuality here, and it doesn't have the innocence of the Reminiscence. It's quite carnal. Beautiful rose note as well. Actually, we should mention the rose. It's kind of making me think a little bit of Absolue pour le Soir, but really nicely done. Really nicely done, and quite abstract, quite witchy, quite green as well in some senses. I just love it. Absolutely. I think one of the best things that Etat Libre have ever done. What's everyone else saying? Oriana says, how about a list of fragrances we got because of Mr. P? How long would that list be, I wonder? Perhaps a touch too sweet for me, says Righty. It is a bit sweet. Ryan says the Carnal Flower Fragrantica page has completely changed, went from being classed as a tuberose to this camphor coconut thing. Oh, interesting. I didn't re-smell Carnal Flower. Perhaps I should have. Alex says, the floral elegance of Art Nouveau, the sensibility of the art, the style of the dresses, everything in a scent. Yes, thank you. Thank you for taking those, well, not taking the words out of my mouth, but for giving me those very useful words. It is very Art Nouveau. Okay, let's move on to number 4. What else can I show you? Let us do this one, for which I don't have a full bottle. And I'm not actually even sure about what era this is for me. I put a question mark next to it because I think for me, this evokes a kind of generic, bygone, you know, sort of centuries ago type era. There's something very primal about it. I thought I had more of this scent than I have here. These are literally just my last few drops, and I almost took it off the list because I thought, oh gosh, can I really spare it for a video? But then I thought, no, it's actually going to be more fun smelling it with you. And I did check on the brand's website to see if they still do it. And according to the website, they do. This is from Andy Tower. So it's from Tower Perfumes from 2008. This is his Incense Rosé. There you go. And it's an oldish sample. I'm not sure if his sample vials still look like that. So I'm going to do, if you don't mind, I'm going to do just the one spray, and I hope the spray mechanism is still working. Oh, I did two. Did you hear that? I did two. We've still got a bit left. If you don't know what Andy's bottles look like, go on his website, but they're basically a sort of blue pentagon. I love Incense Rosé, says Thomas. I mean, I really should have a full bottle of this. I should treat myself to a full bottle of this, shouldn't I? This is like, I mean, this really is like a kind of primeval, like, I don't know. I've never been to Jordan. I've never been to Petra. I would love to visit Petra one day. Madame Persolaise would really love to visit Petra. But I'd imagine that this is like, you know, the smell of Petra, or what the smell of Petra would have been centuries ago. It's really, really kind of ancient smelling. Woozy says, do you know what happened with Andy's incense supply that made them all a bit more expensive? No idea. I didn't even know they had become more expensive. It's, I mean, as the name says, it is a beautiful incense rose composition. The incense, I think, is what gives it this meditative, ancient, primal quality. The rose is what makes it tender and heartfelt and welcoming and delicate. Just gorgeous and very, very different in style from the sorts of things he does now. He seems to have gone down the route of making quite a few limited editions, and I guess creatively, business-wise, that makes sense for him. But it does also mean that I don't get a chance to smell his works, because by the time I get to whoever stocks them, they've gone, and you haven't got any samples, etc., 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 which is a little bit frustrating because I'm such an admirer of his work. But his style has changed. I think his style has become maybe a bit more cerebral. And back in 2008, I don't know, was he still being led a little bit more by his gut? I mean, this is pure speculation on my part, but I think he was still making more things that smelt somehow ancient, like he was being guided, his hands were being guided by the gods of perfume past. The cardamom in an incense rosé is incredible, says Woozy. Yeah, I hadn't thought of cardamom being here, actually, but yes, you're absolutely right. Rachel says, this is one of Tower's I've not smelled. Oh, it's so good. I love Rose Chypre, and I would have included Rose Chypre here, but that's not listed on the site anymore. Apparently that's gone. I also love Incense Extreme. That is still on the website, but for this one, for the video, I decided to go for this. You know, smelling it here now, it's got his traditional amber vanillic base that you get a lot of in his L'air du désert marocain, in Orange Star. But it's the incense that gives it that kind of purity, I think, as well. Really, really beautiful work. He knows how to handle incense really well, and he knows how to handle rose very well, and so that's why I think this scent is so special. Tomasz says, I love that Tower perfume, and to be frank, I find it most exciting of all his scents. Interesting. I remember Mr. Persolaise recommending Orange Star to us. Yeah, I probably did. I'm a big fan of Orange Star. I like Orange Star. Oh, and you're still talking about the scents that I made you buy, that I influenced you to buy. So Oriana says, my Mr. P list, L'Eau d'Hiver. Oh, that's a good one. Lone Star Memories, another Tower, my favorite Tower still, and Adorem. Oh, I adore Adorem. Those are good ones. You should have those in your collection. I'm glad I made you get those. Jeff says, Noir Épice sends me back to Christmas times of yore. Yes, I have yet to smell a Tower perfume. Where to start, says David. I think start with the older ones. Start with the original ones. See if you can see if where you live they will send a discovery set to you. So smell Lone Star Memories, L'air du désert, Le Maroc, Pour Elle. Yeah, I would say start there, and then I think then you will get the progression. Ryan says, Mr. P influenced me to buy Avignon These are good ones. I should be on commission. Omar, my Mr. P purchase is L'Orpheline. Yeah, different one. There's a bit of an incense theme running through here. Okay, we are just about at the half-hour mark, so we need to do number 5. And for number 5, let us do a little bit more overt, obvious nostalgia. This is a scent from 2019, credited to Monsieur Antoine Maisondieu. And this makes me think of the 70s because it is Tom Ford, Beau de Jour. Now, I forget, did it originally come in this bottle and then move into a different one? Or did it originally come in? I think it originally came in this, right? So I've got an original. Am I right? Somebody help me out. Beau de Jour, we talked about this recently on the video when we smelt. What did we smell? I was smelling a kind of 1980s. Gosh, my brain is in proper Christmas mode. Omar says, you're right, this is the original bottle. I thought hairy-chested perfumes, says Gavin. But which one in particular was I smelling? Jeez, my mind is... The Tuscany. We were smelling Aramis Tuscany, weren't we? And I forgot to say in that video that they all owe allegiance to Brut, right? To the original Fabergé Brut. And Beau de Jour is absolutely one of those scents that needs to get down on its knees and bow down and pay homage to Brut. And it's very, very, very well done. You're still going on about the ones you bought because of me. I'm enjoying reading this. What's that? I bought a bottle of Angel Extrait under Mr. P's influence, says Eric. Ah, are you glad you did? I do like Angel Extrait. I've just realized this is the first time I'm doing a kind of top 10, I think, in this setup, and I'm not sure where to put the bottles. We're going to have to work this out somehow. Let's see how we go. Let me pop that one on there. Yeah, that kind of works. Maybe take a picture of it, or maybe we should do this. Let's give ourselves a little bit of extra surface so we can do that, and then we'll kind of adjust as we go along. Yeah, that kind of works. That's not so bad. Beau de Jour says, Ralph would be my one and only if I had to make the decision. So much nostalgia with this one. Interesting. Oris says, I recently got the current version of Beau de Jour and liked it for the first few wears, but then I got Amber Woods in the dry down and I no longer could stomach it. That's a shame. Anyway, so this is an old school fougere, very, very unashamedly old school. So it's got a kind of coumarin, hay-like heart, almondy heart, rose geranium at the top as well, some kind of citrus doing heavy lifting, and then lots and lots of patchouli, a lavender note as well, lots of patchouli, kind of powdery, sweet barbershop notes. I mean, it really is very much like Brut. It probably wouldn't have, well, probably, almost certainly doesn't have the musks that would have made original Brut what it was, but it does have some very, very well judged musks in the base. And it is all of those hairy chested Robert Redford with unbuttoned shirt cliches. It is all of those sorts of things, which is why I think it would also be really, really interesting on a woman. I think fougères are absolutely fascinating to wear, for women to wear. What was the fougère that Mugler released a few years ago in their Exceptions range? It was called Fougère something. Was it called that was really, 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 that worked really, really well on women as well. Jeff says Mr. P has also helped me lose interest in brands like Creed, Killian, and Parfum de Marly. I mean, I'm not going to apologize, but you know, I do say that if you enjoy their work, then just please keep wearing it and enjoying it and smelling it, because maybe for whatever reason it resonates with you. I mean, I don't want to put people off. Well, maybe actually I do, but you know what? You must always wear what you enjoy. Fougère Furieux. Yeah, I thought it was Furious. Fougère Furieuse or something like that. That was a good one. That was a good one. And this has got a very, very properly old school sensibility. I don't know how involved Tom Ford was in the making of it, but I would imagine that he was quite involved in the making of this one in a way that I guess he's not involved anymore, because he fully left the brand. What was it, just over a year ago? Dennis says, just sprayed this one to smell it as I'm listening to you. This and Sartorial are my favorite fougere. That's a good one as well. That's a good one. Nice one from Penhaligon's. Okay, so we have done 5. We have 5 to go. So at this point, I should just say that what we're doing is our top 10 perfumes for winter 2024, scents that in one way or another could be described as being nostalgic. If you're enjoying the video, please give it a thumbs up because that really, really helps with the old algorithm. But let us carry on. Ileana says, you might want to try Carno Barcelona scents. They are often sweet, but never disappointing. Ah, thank you very much. Beau de Jour is amazing, says Sahika. I nearly bought it. It didn't smell masculine to me as a woman. There you go. Perfect. Nima says, what I'm sensing, Mr. P, is dangerous for our wallets, but life-changing for our tastes. Yes, but I don't want anybody to, to lose their hard-earned pennies. Spend wisely, spend responsibly. Who needs to eat, right? Okay. Number 6 on the list. Number 6. Let's do this one because this is one of my favorite perfumes of recent years. This is from 2016, so a few years older than the Tom Ford. Credited to one Florence. I have no idea how to pronounce their surname. Is it Fouillet or Fouillet? Really, really sorry. This is from Les Indemodables. It's their Oriental Velours. Can you see that? So velvet Oriental. And this one just makes me think of the traveling that you could do if you were wealthy and independent in the 1920s. And of course, there were not many people who were that wealthy and independent in the 1920s, but never mind, this is a fantasy video. It specifically made me think of the book that I read over the summer, probably my favorite book of the year, Damon Galgut's Arctic Summer, which is a kind of fictionalized telling of E.M. Forster writing A Passage to India. I don't know, it just kind of evokes that whole milieu, evokes that whole world, a genteel, polite, and yet also kind of repressed world. And yet maybe the repression actually causes some of the feelings to be more intense and more memorable and more heartfelt. I don't know. It's like, if there is too much permissiveness, if there's too much freedom, then maybe some things lose their meaning. I don't know. It's a weird balance, isn't it? If you haven't got something, then you really appreciate what you have got more, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, Oriental Velours. Oh, Carry On says, I love the 70s pen, Mr. P. They still make those 4-color pens. I love these sorts of pens. And this is a proper Bic pen. And I also like the ones that they do in the sort of metallic shades and the pastel shades. My handwriting is rubbish anyway, so I tend not to spend money on a lot of pens. I have one expensive fountain pen that I treasure, but the other stuff is just any kind of pen. And I do like those. Rachel says, such a beautiful fragrance. And also really difficult to describe Oriental Velours. There's a kind of iris note. There's a beautiful rose note. There's an incense note. Shades of YSL Nu that was done by Jacques Cavalier. There's a sort of plummy, boozy note. Lots of resins, lots of balsams, incense, vanilla. Gorgeously handled musks. I mean, really, really beautifully handled musks. It's just heartbreaking. It's really, really heartbreaking. And I think if there is one thing that they will have in common in the sense of this nostalgia, these ones at least that we've done so far, is a real, it's a kind of emotional intensity. Even the number 18, they all wear their heart on their sleeve, in a way. See, whenever I smell Oriental Velours, I think, why do I not wear this stuff more often? It is just so beautiful. Navi Light says, this one is definitely the hardest to wear of their set for me, but I found it intriguing. It made me think of greens and golds. Interesting. I mean, for me, this one was instant love. I get what you mean about golds. Greens as well, I suppose, to some extent, like powdery greens. See, this could have been a tower as well. This could have been like a sort of rose chypre. So beautiful. Hard to wear for me too, says Ileana. Ah, Ryan says a gummy, varnishy, piney, dark, warm scent, beautiful. Don't know much about the perfumer. Varnishy. See, I don't get those sorts of notes. I get real rich florals, iris, patchouli again, beautiful balsams. I mean, I get richness. I get the kind of very similar sort of sense of Frederic Malle's Une Fleur de Cassis, which I nearly included on this list, but I thought, oh gosh, I've talked about that one so much. No one mentions Cuir de Chine, so I love that one too. But I haven't got that one, so I couldn't share it. That's a really, really lovely one as well. Okay, let's keep going. Let's do now. This one is brand new. This one is from this year, so potentially a little bit of a controversial inclusion. But I keep getting comments on my original video review of this one with people saying that they have really, really fallen in love with it. And lots of people saying that they don't get the fuss and they think it's quite dull, it's quite boring. I think it's really, really interesting. This is the kind of this year's mainstream release from Hermes. It's their Barenia, composed by Christine Nagel, of course. And we're going to put aside what the brand said about, it's their first chypre, and then they kind of changed that and they said it's Christine Nagel's first chypre for the brand, when they realized that actually maybe some of their older scents could have been described as chypre. We'll put that to one side. But because it's a chypre, I think it does have a kind of nostalgic quality, but it's also quite modern. Now, I've put down here that it kind of makes me think of the 50s. I love Barenia. It's unique, says Carry On. See, this is interesting because I think my issue with it is that I actually don't find it all that unique. I think it's extremely well done. But anyway, put that to one side because I've done my review. I have included it on the list here because I think it's worth talking about again. It does have a kind of 1950s elegance to it. There's something very grown up about it. There's something quite kind of buttoned up, tailored about it. It's a fruity chypre, so in that sense it's quite modern, but it is nowhere near as kind of crass and simplistic as the kind of thing that passes, or the brands try to tell us is a fruity chypre nowadays. It's almost like she came along and thought, okay, well, fruity chypre seem to be doing quite well, so I'm going to try and make one of the best examples of the genre, and it certainly is one of the best examples of the genre we've had for a long, long time. Carry On says, something about Barenia reminds me of the original Miss Dior from 1947. Yes, and I think that is absolutely deliberate, and maybe that's why I kind of thought 50s, those sorts of waist accentuating outfits, all of that sort of thing, hats, gloves, rich fabrics. It definitely tends in that sort of direction. It's quite radiant. It's quite kind of quietly suede-like leathery. And what I like about it is that it taps into this sort of nostalgic feel. Ula says, I like the glassy texture of it, as in some other Hermes scents, but I didn't fall in love with it. Sahika says, look at Turin calls Barenia another fruituli. Well, it kind of is another fruituli, but is it better than most fruitulis or not? Discuss. Throw on your Hermes silk scarf and you are good to go, says Carry On. If I had one, I absolutely would. But yes, it completely captures that sort of vibe. Now, obviously, the brand have been marketing it as super modern, super contemporary. But I think when she made it, Christine Nagel was very much inspired by the past. It is interesting. I think it's interesting. And I hope Hermes allow it to stick around long enough for it to find a loyal following, because I think ultimately it will. Okay, let's move on to another one that's from this year. Somebody said that they hoped that there would be a Puente on this list, and there is. I have included Eliane Puente's Galavant. This is very, very obviously kind of nostalgic. What did I say it makes me think of here? Oh, I've put down here that it's like the late 1940s. I don't know why, but a sort of post-war era, a little bit austere, but also full of emotion. I mean, really, really very, very emotional sort of scent. It's a kind of aldehydic floral, I suppose. It is nicely done. It is. I reviewed it not that long ago. So it's an aldehydic floral. The aldehydes are very, very marked, very pronounced, but it is by no means a Chanel No. 5 clone. And if anything, once it's given you that kind of initial Chanel No. 5 burst, it actually takes you into the kind of rosy sandalwood of Bois d'Azil, and then into the sandalwood of Samsara. And you realize that it's actually as inspired by Samsara as it is by the likes of No. 5 and Bois d'Azil. Orisiero says, Mr. P made me. Yeah, I know I did. Made me by Chyprelia from Puente, also quite nostalgic. I love that one. Really, really love that one. Rachel says, yes, a 1940s vibe. Yeah. Very, very gently powdery, but also still quite authoritative, full of personality, and really rich as well somehow, without being decadent. I really love it. Very, very, very impressed with it. Okay. And we are down to our last two. So we need to do the other one that is from Ralph Schwieger. And as I say, this was not planned. Now, this one, I checked out on the website whether the brands still do this. They do still have this as a part of their lineup. But it doesn't come in this bottle anymore because they updated their bottles a little while ago. From Aedes de Venustas, this is their Iris Nazarena from 2013. Now, my nostalgic association with this one is completely fantastical because I decided that for me, this is a kind of late 19th century scent. I'm thinking of the characters in books from Edith Wharton, the characters either in the House of Mirth or the Age of Innocence going around to their high society parties and that kind of thing. It also happens to be one of the most beautiful iris compositions of this century so far. Adore this wet, rooty iris, says Righty. This one I really should have on more prominent display somewhere so I can actually spray it more often. This is the problem with the likes of me. I don't actually often enough get to wear the things that I want to wear because more often than not, I'm testing stuff. Tragic heroine crushed by society's conventions perfume, says Gavin. Yes. What's the name of the character in House of Mirth? Lily Bart, as played by Gillian Anderson in the film. And when I met Gillian Anderson at the Middle East Film and Comic Con, I got her to sign my DVD of The House of Mirth. But you could also take Madame Olenska from The Age of Innocence. This is a rare iris that I don't adore for some reason, says Oris. I love Edith Wharton, however. I forgive you. This, I seem to remember when I first smelt this over 10 years ago, that it felt like an iris that really, really grows. It takes root and it kind of entwines its way around your heart. It's quite dry, really, really carroty as I'm smelling it here now on the blotter. And just very much smells of the past, smells of an era that we will never be able to recapture again, that we will, never be able to revisit because anybody who was around then is long gone. It just somehow sums up the utter unattainability of the past. And I guess because of that, it's quite heartbreaking. It's a very, very purist sort of iris. I suppose the woods are more emphasized here. That I seem to remember there is a sort of strong musk note, but it doesn't come out very much at the top. And it's also just a touch arid, which I think is what makes it interesting. There's a kind of, I don't know, I think the aridity is what presents it or makes you think that it's a sort of impassioned plea for sympathy, for tolerance. Lily Bart would have smelt of this. It gets very woody as it dries down, says Misspelled Tomato. Yes, it does, but I love it for that. Is it waxy at all? Says, is it eggy? No, not particularly waxy. Not particularly waxy. I've never smelt it. Does it resemble the nostalgia of L'Heure Bleue? Says Mariana. Maybe to some extent, but L'Heure Bleue is so much bigger, isn't it? And L'Heure Bleue is more snuggly with its vanilla. This isn't quite like that. Okay, L'Heure Bleue though. If you're talking nostalgia, you've got to have a Guerlain. Okay, and pretty much any of the original Guerlains would have done the job here. So I thought, okay, well, what should I go for today? And I decided to go for one that actually does kind of make me think of the era in which it was released. From 1933, although this is not an old bottle, I would love to smell a really, really old bottle of this. From 1933, from Monsieur Jacques Guerlain himself. This is, of course, Vol de Nuit, their night flight. Can you see that? There you go. Which was also kind of referenced in their Neroli Plein Sud, tangentially referenced in their Neroli Plein Sud from earlier this year. Vol de Nuit is an interesting one for me because I really love it, but I almost never wear it. I don't think it's a scent that particularly works on me or suits me, but I adore smelling it, and I'm such an admirer of how it's made. Is that the EDT or the EDP out of interest? This is the EDT, he said semi-confidently. I'm pretty sure this was the EDT. Yes, it's the EDT. I'm very, very, very fortunate to have the propeller X-ray bottle, really, really beautiful. But I thought, let me, for the sake of the video, present something that is a little bit more easily accessible. Misspelled Tomato says, ooh, Vol de Nuit, I just tried it for the first time. It is so beautiful. The parfum is quite different from the EDT. Yes, you're right, but okay. This is serious stuff. This is serious stuff. And I guess there is a kind of intensity to it that makes me think of what must have been a very, very intense period leading to the end of the 30s, and of course, the tragedy that ensued then. But it's just like all the best Guerlains from that era. It is so complex. You can't even begin to describe it. Really fascinating green galbanum-y note at the top. Again, a host of florals, you know, irises and roses flying around. It's really difficult to actually pin Vol de Nuit down into one or two categories. I get a kind of stewed vegetable feel from it as well. And even though that's what I get, I still love it. Quite woody, quite powdery, quite vanillic, very, very herbal, very dry. And it's got a sense of movement to it. I think Night Flight is a very, very good name for it. And it's also got a sense of something nocturnal about it. But to me, it's about an intensity, an intense emotionality, as though you're kind of desperately racing against the clock to prevent something terrible from happening. So it's like, I don't know, it's some kind of ridiculous coincidence in a Thomas Hardy novel where you're sort of, you know, somebody's trying to get somewhere to intercept a letter so that such and such a person doesn't get the letter. It's got that kind of intensity to it. Very melodramatic, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. But beautiful, really beautiful. Another one I should wear more often. Okay, and we are done. So thank you very much for coming along on that little nostalgia trip with me. I suppose that's not a bad array. What do we think? I can rearrange them a little bit for when I take a photo for the old gram. I have vintage Chamad and Nema as well. Oh, treasure every single drop of those. Smark says, when did they stop making those bottles? I have Chamad and Jardin de Bagatelle in that bottle. I don't know. I've lost track of when various things happened at Guerlain. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for all the comments and the laughs and the suggestions and the ideas and the research and the fact checking. Stay tuned to social media for details of new videos coming your way soon. But until next time, be good. Bye now.